Here we are flying above the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Spectacular view today. We've been studying this region for some time, and what we've learned is that the largest migration on Earth occurs beneath the sea here.
We're keeping alive a tradition of tagging that goes back almost 40 years now to when I was a young student working with Dr. Frank Carey of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution.
Dr. Carey was pioneering deployment of acoustic technology on large predatory fish when a crisis struck the shark world.
There's something going on. What's going on? No, that's a problem.
It was 1975, and the world's first summer blockbuster was released. Jaws smashed box office records and unleashed in irrational terror the idea that the only good shark was a dead shark. Jaws' author, Peter Benchley, was horrified and became a dedicated shark conservationist. He joined forces with Carey on the first scientific expedition to study white sharks in the Atlantic.
This will give us water temperature, the depth of the fish, and his muscle temperature.
He's coming up to the boat. He wants to bite the boat.
Dr. Carey believed white sharks' hunting ability, endurance, and intense bursts of speed were enhanced by being warm-bodied.
Nice place?
Nice place. Terrific. Let's see what his temperature is. It's 23.2. The water is 17 degrees, so the fish is 23. That's a 6-degree difference. That's really warm.
This important revelation was followed by a stream of scientific firsts, including Stan Waterman shooting this first footage of a white shark below American waters. Carey collected biological data as the shark swam for 110 miles over 5 days, showing that electronic tagging was the wave of the future. Barbara Block was Frank's technician. She was inspired and took Carey's pioneering science into the future.
Some 40 years later, with some of the world's most advanced technology that you can put on an animal in the sea, and what we're hoping to get is a lot more of the undersea behavior, what's really happening from the white shark point of view this year.
Shark up.
Shark's right here.
We really designed this process to be a non-invasive tagging process, but it requires that the animals come close to you. And the idea is that they come within 5 or 6 feet of the boat, and that's when you clamp that tag on.
High five.
What our entire program is about is figuring out how do we really see beneath the sea and capture what's not very transparent. How many sharks there are, how many tunas there are, and how do we prevent the poaching that our generation has unleashed upon the oceans that will guarantee that future generations see these great predators.
Media is not a substitute for social movements, but obviously social movements depend on it. It's the oxygen.
Growing communications tools that link young people around our blue planet and create social movements out of common shared values. These are the moments and movements that one waits a lifetime to experience, and young people in every part of our blue ocean planet are beginning to come together and say, if we just take the extractable resources, we extract them all and we end up with a wasteland. It's also a product liability issue. This product, oil used as directed, overheats our planet and acidifies our seas. Each of us can act at so many levels as consumers, as citizens, to really change the tide and to become part of something larger. It's an opportunity. We really can build a kind of citizen movement and engagement that changes everything.
Yeah. All righty, good afternoon, everybody. So let's dive right in. So maybe as a first opening question, whoever wants to take it. So why should we care about the oceans? So what role does oceans actually play for us human beings?
Small question.
Go ahead.
Take a breath or two and talk about it.
Well, it's good that you say that. Take a breath. One of the things that we say is about 50 to 80% of the oxygen in our atmosphere that we breathe is as a result of the ocean. My career, I started in the Amazon, and the reason I went to work in the Amazon was because it was the lungs of the planet, and deforestation was this massive concern at the time that we thought was contributing and driving a lot of climate change. That's true, but I think what we've learned since is that and just even in the last 5 years, we're learning more and more about how the ocean is the underpinning for the global climate system. We think of it as like maybe the beating heart of the climate system. So it's hard to underestimate the role of the ocean in creating a habitable planet. So I'll tee that up for everyone else.
Great job. I mean, oceans literally cover 70% of our planet. And the oceans provide us both with a blue economy that we are dependent upon as humans, as well as, Kyle said, the oxygen we breathe. We're actually jeopardizing right now our sustainability on this planet by putting heat into the ocean, putting CO2 into the sea, making it much like a Coke warming up on your desk, bubble off oxygen that's vital for animals in the sea, and more corrosive because of the absorption of CO2, which means the gills of the sharks and the tunas will be affected.
Yeah, I mean, it's respiration, recreation, transportation, trade, energy, protein, just that sense of awe and wonder when you look out to sea and realize you're part of something larger than yourself, and always that sense that, the sea was too large to impact, and yet in our blink of an eye, it's been my lifetime, we've totally begun an alteration of the largest living system on the planet.
Anna, Richard, any other comments?
We're doing so much to harm our ocean, and we depend on it so much, like everyone has already said. But I think one of the most important things is bringing awareness to how vital and how critical it is. And I'm hearing a lot more people talking about the ocean, especially with climate change. And it's a good thing, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I think it can be done on a broad scale, it can be done on a legislative scale, it can be done on an individual scale. So the mission is really to get the word out because it's critical and it's vital to our survival.
So what signals do you see that really make you believe that we are at great risk for the future of the oceans? So are the things that you really see, here are the clear elements that you should see loud and clear of why we're at risk?
Florida just had a red tide, a harmful algal bloom that killed hundreds of manatees, thousands of marine mammals, billions of fish, and created harmful impacts for human health. People were actually coughing and getting sick. That was on the Gulf Coast of Florida. At the same time, you had your green-blue algae repeating on the East Coast, which is called, green gunk by the locals, destroying the economy, threatening society, and globally we're seeing increase of these harmful algal blooms. This is just one of the indicators of a sick ocean when what we need is a healthy ocean.
Mm-hmm. And the other one is also coral bleaching, right? That's been on an exponential increase, unfortunately. And that's like the canary in the gold mine.
And this is, the largest living system on Earth that you can see from space, the Great Barrier Reef. And we're seeing, if you get a chance to see Chasing Coral, it's a good documentary film that will we wouldn't show it. The Anna's Ocean Film Fest introduced our March for the Ocean in June, and we decided that we wouldn't show certain films like Chasing Coral because I didn't want people crying while they were marching for power.
I would say, one of the things that we know so little about the ocean, and that's increasing with all the technology and the sensors and the capability we have to explore. The problem of ocean plastic has gotten a lot of attention in the press, and I think we've often been wondering about that as ocean scientists because we've been talking about climate change, which is literally melting the planet for decades. And this has not gotten as much attention as ocean plastic. But what I can tell you is that Most of what we know about the ocean, we know about the surface. If you heard Barb in that first clip she showed, one of the fascinating things about these electronic tags is they tell us about the real lives of tuna and sharks that are traveling all sorts of places that we've never really been. One of the things we've learned about plastic in the ocean, which through our work with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, is that most of the microplastic that's in the ocean is far below the surface. It's several hundred meters below the surface, about 4 times the surface level. And everywhere we looked, we found plastic. We found it at the deepest places. We found it at the surface, obviously. But everything that you pretty much know about ocean microplastic is from studies done at the surface, which is an accessible place. And what we learn, the further deep, the farthest we go, is that it's everywhere. And so one of the alarming things for us is that if you thought microplastic in the ocean was a problem, it's a lot worse of a problem than you probably knew. Because the further you go, the further deep you go, the more you find.
What you don't want with technology for observation is you don't want to have like real-time digital imagery of an ecosystem in collapse. So when you use good technology for, fisheries enforcement, as Gould is working on, when you use it for tracking and science, as Barbara's doing, developing those kind of applications of bringing engineers together with the biologists, as Mbari does, then hopefully, and in places like California, the discoveries then, the science actually gets applied to policy. Unfortunately, that's not true at the present time in DC, where even the basic science is denied. But I think we have a moment with the technology that we can transform it into policy with enough popular will, and we'll talk about that.
I think what we have to think about is, as a scientist, we're asking some really big picture questions. What is Earth going to look like without ice caps? What is the consequence of melting our polar and Antarctic caps? What is it going to do in terms of submergence, ocean currents changing, the entire biosphere that we live on Earth becoming different? We're in the 6th mass extinction. So how many of you like to eat sushi here? You can admit it. Lots of hands going up. Brian, of course. So the capacity of humans to eat our way through both land and sea is enormous. So we're actually destroying our ocean environment by not being sustainable about what we eat. Sushi, poke, all those type of restaurants are contributing to this problem, killing not only tunas, but killing sharks and sea turtles and seabirds. I think that there's hope in the sense that we have places like Google, which are using their tremendous resources right now, not only to do searches that help us understand what we're looking for, but also creating transparency in the ocean through Google Oceans and Global Fish Watch, creating a capacity to now see where humans are impacting the planet in a way that we've never been able to see before. So we're able to turn on a light switch and see where humans are, and if we can use big data crunching, combining fish and chips, as well as fish and chips, we'll be able to potentially get our hands on some of these problems.
And I think with my background, 30 years as a journalist, I can't be an eco-optimist, but what I do say is we're now at the stage of triage. That we're going to save what we can while we can. The IPCC report in 2018 says that if we can keep temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we can save perhaps 10% of our living coral reef systems. If it goes over 2 degrees, we lose it. And so, with existential threats like this, we need big responses. I mean, right now I'm working on the Blue New Deal, the ocean and coastal aspects that we want to integrate, and I'm going back east to DC on Wednesday to talk to the people who introduced the Green New Deal, which is a great concept. By the time there's hopefully a change in government and we hit the ground running in January 2021 with real legislation to really do the transition that science tells us we have to.
And to add to that, I think we're very well-versed and knowledgeable about what's happening in the ocean, and really appreciate this opportunity to share what we know. And one thing that keeps popping up that I'm reading a lot more about is the increase in population, because we as humans are the ones that are doing most of the damage. And we are the ones that need to be educated. But with the increase in population and just it's taking its toll on the finite resources that this planet has to offer us. And I think that is another component that plays into all of this that we need to start talking about as well.
You are the experts in this field as a layperson on the outside. So what would you think we should know being the 3 largest challenges we're faced with the oceans? I know there are more, but if you would say, if you can only fix the first 3, what would those first 3 be?
Should we huddle first and decide which ones we want?
I think that one thing that we have to fix, or not fix, but actually establish, is a relationship between us and the ocean. You know, I think Kyle, you brought up the point of, you know, how come we didn't really have so much pickup in the media about climate change and now plastic pollution? Well, the reason is because every one of us uses plastic. It's something that we, you know, it's our children's birthday toys. It's our plastic knives, it's lots of, you know, chairs in this room. So unless and until we can start connecting those dots and make it very personal, something that we care about, because what do people care about? They care about their health, they care about their finances, our children, things that are near and dear to us, right? So we have to find those things that make the ocean near and dear to us. So that would be...
Not 3, but when I wrote 50 ways to save the ocean, number 1 is go to the beach because you protect what you love. And I think that's why things work in California, because Californians have the sense of entitlement to the beach and ocean because we have the access.
I think we have to eat sustainably. So we've got to figure out what that means both on land and sea. And when you see that brand new pokey restaurant down the street, start asking the question, when you put a piece of tuna in your mouth, where did that tuna come from? We don't put beef in our mouth and do it without knowing where is this beef from, what type of animal is it? And yet we do this with ocean food all the time. So I want everyone to take a moment and think about, what is it I'm eating, and has it been caught sustainably? Is it something I should be eating, and what kind of waters did it come out of?
I was at the Our Ocean conference that John Kerry put on when he was Secretary of State. And Sylvia Earle came late to the lunch table, and there's just one tray left with sort of gray fillets labeled fish. She goes, "What kind of fish?" I go, "Oh, there's the Assistant Secretary of State. Let's go ask her." Drag her over, and she goes, Sylvia's like, "It's labeled fish." She goes, "Well, I asked the caterers, you know, to make sure it was sustainable." She says, "But it's labeled fish. The chicken's not labeled bird."
The chicken's not labeled bird.
I think what everyone said is obviously important. Climate change, I think we probably agree, is the number one threat facing the ocean and the planet. Sustainable fishing is absolutely up there. And I think that just from a sheer scientific standpoint, I would say marine pollution and sewage and plastic as part of that is got to be up there. And Aldo Leopold said that we love and we grow to love what we understand. And by engaging California, I mean, I'm not from California, but one of the fascinating things about coming here a couple decades ago was that the dream of California seems to me the coexistence of relatively pristine nature and the most advanced technological society that we have right here in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. We have this wonderful open space, and we didn't have that by accident. We had that on purpose because people loved the open space and the coast, and then we have this California Coastal Commission who vehemently defends that. And that is the essence of like Surfrider Foundation and organizations like that. I'm a surfer. I don't surf on certain days because I don't want the pollution in the water to get sick from that. And just engaging and taking care of the place where you are, I think, is absolutely critical.
And when I wrote The Golden Shore, California's love affair with the sea, which I won't flash up here, but basically I've been in DC 9 years, and I came home, and a lot of what we do with Blue Frontiers, how do we scale up solutions in time? And I realized California is the solution at scale. We're 40 million people, we're the world's 5th largest economy, and we do pretty good with our coast and ocean because there's that sense of entitlement, and I also think there's this democracy of blue interest, because you have conservationists and surfers and fishermen and the Navy and the ports and all these different interests that value. And when you do right by the ocean, you find out it does good by your economy and everything else.
Let me ask a selfish question to Barbara and to Birgitte as well. So this notion of, does what I eat really make a difference? and there's one person really can make a difference. So when you talk about knowing what you eat, whether it's sushi, poke, whatever that might be, how would you deal with an individual who's going to pose you the question, my individual actions don't really make a difference because I'm one of now 7 billion people? How do you ultimately touch that individual and make him or her believe that his or her actions do make a difference?
Well, I would say that you're not just one person. You're one of 7 billion. So the more of us that think like that, it's going to be 7 billion people thinking like this.
I agree. I mean, we've lost our connection to the natural world. It's happening all the time as we evolve on this planet as a human species. I think that the more that we can understand that individuals make a difference through both education, such as the aquarium, or through youth programs connecting humans to the sea, humans to the land, the better off this planet will be, because that's what we've lost across the globe. And the more we interact with technology, the less we interact with the world around us.
And that's why, like, you guys know that Instagram egg? How many of you have seen that? The one that garnered more, I mean, like the most Instagram likes ever. And so I think, well, if I were that one person liking that egg, I could have said, well, I'm just one person. I'm not going to make a change in how many likes this egg has. And yet, we've got 35 or 50 million likes, right? So we've just got to find that thing that makes us hit like on the ocean.
In French, they say that one egg is enough. But, you know, it's really, it's this false dichotomy. I can't help myself. People say, well, is it the personal or political? And it's like saying, do you quit smoking or fight big tobacco? I mean, I don't eat sushi. And then we had, you know, a Healthy Ocean Hill Day where we lobbied and helped pass an IUU pirate fishing bill so that we don't deplete the ocean. I mean, your individual acts, you know, the things you do inspire you to engage with the larger world. And, you know.
So how do you engage your audience? So how do you get people actually excited about your world versus so many other worlds that are screaming for attention and for activism as well? Maybe for you, David.
Start with people who love the ocean, who live by the ocean. We try and you know, build a constituency. We bring every 2 years, except this year because it's useless, bring people together in DC from around the ocean, connect maritime conservationists with maritime communities, realize they have allies in places like big institutions like the Monterey Aquarium, the National Aquarium, that, you know, that they have allies with the Commandant of the Coast Guard or with Senators Whitehouse or Markey. And go on the Hill. We've had Healthy Ocean Hill Days where we've had 26 state delegations, and the third biggest was from Colorado, because in April we're going to have an inland ocean action summit in Dallas, and we're going to try and grow the inland ocean movement and make people realize every state's a coastal state. You connect up. It starts, like I say, number one is go to the beach. It starts with people who love and care and depend for their livelihoods on the ocean. And then you just try and do whatever you can and use whatever tools you have to connect with people. Tools like the International Ocean Film Festival and the tools of science, and make science exciting the way, you know, Barbara gets to commune with great white sharks. And one of the things in California is we're not afraid. There's a sense that if there's not something bigger and meaner than you are out there, it's not really a wilderness. And I think that just making those connections, I always talk about our job in the U.S. is to restore the blue in our red, white, and blue. You know, it's patriotic not to pollute our living seas.
And I want to add, too, that I actually went with David to Washington, D.C. for one of his Blue Vision summits. I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but there was so many people from all over the country, and we had the opportunity to meet with our legislators, and we were discussing the ocean policy back then. And we had 3 things that we wanted to talk about, and it was my first time actually being on the Hill. And actually being able to talk to my legislators, and I was so impressed with the impact that we had as a group coming from across the United States and having a voice and communicating our interest in what we needed. So getting people together and getting that voice out there is what David does, and we do it with the film festival as well. So we provide a platform for people to come together and talk about the ocean. And we show films from around the world, and film is incredibly powerful for telling a message, whether it's a 30-second PSA, Blue Serengeti film that we showed, Barbara's film that we showed and had a wonderful panel discussion about that afterwards. But
Well, when and where might you be doing this?
thanks, David. The festival is coming up in March 7 through 10, and it's at Cowell Theater in San Francisco. So it's really an opportunity for us to raise awareness about the ocean, and there's something for everyone in terms of the myriad topics that we cover, because there's so many issues in the ocean that need to be talked about. Not only climate change, sea level rising, overfishing, mining, drilling, sand dredging, marine wildlife, but we also show films that are how we engage with the ocean and appreciate it and have fun with it, from surfing and sailing and the joy that it brings us and the peace and the tranquility that it brings us, which is all the more reason to protect it. But again, it's just like David said, bringing people together who are like-minded, who have a common interest and want to do something. And until you learn about what you can do, you're kind of at a loss, so to speak. And so the films and David's summit, it's really just a matter of getting engaged and finding out what's out there and what's available.
And last June 9th, Anna brought the film festival the night before in DC. We had a first ever March for the Ocean. And the Anchor March in DC was only like 3,000 people, but there were 114 other marches that happened around the world. And we discovered that there's this whole youthful cohort, this sort of year class of 10 to 18-year-olds who are very engaged around plastic. And so the Dublin March, an 11-year-old activist led 500 people in Dublin. And out in the Pacific, there was a 12 and a 16-year-old who organized, the Chamorros on their island that then got hit by a typhoon 3 months later. So, people are, and we'll do it again on World Oceans Day, June 8th, but people are marching for something that's immediately on top of them. I mean, what we saw with the hurricane season of 2017, and then the climate impacts with, I think 2018 was sort of the year of no denial between, Mexico Beach, Florida, and Paradise, California. And the ocean's the driver of climate and weather, and it takes 90% of the heat that we put out there. So it's key. Any climate solution has to also be an ocean solution.
I mean, there's another aspect that we have to think about that maybe someone in the Google environment can help us with. We're hunters and gatherers, and I ask my students at Stanford all the time, how many are planning your dinner a week from now? Anybody? I see one hand in the audience. So how can we, as a species that's really been focused on a very short-term future, how do we get people to worry about something that's going to be a disaster less than 30 to 50 years away? All right? And that's the challenge we face as a species worldwide. And I think about this a lot.
So maybe just building upon that. So I believe that all of you know extraordinarily well what the challenges are we're faced with the oceans. You probably have clarity as well on what needs to get done. So maybe for the audience, if you were in control, if you had your magical wand, what 3 elements would you do and how would you go about it? So to me, it's the question of what needs to get done, but at the same time, how do you get it done in today's very polarized environment?
I'll start. I'm a researcher, and I get flabbergasted at how small amount of money that is needed right now to do some major push forward in our ocean knowledge. So imagine a planet where we haven't really explored the entire planet. We've got new technology in DNA technology, bioinformatics, that allows us to actually go in, take a Ziploc full of water and figure out who swam by. So we need to develop these types of technologies to better census our oceans. We've got companies across the planet that are able to manage data, like Google, and do an outstanding job of bringing together big data. Right now, there's not a big data platform for the oceans that combines information in a way that makes it accessible to both scientists and the public. We need that big data platform for our oceans as soon as possible. We need to develop sensors that allow us to know how the oxygen is changing in the ocean, how the pH is changing in the ocean, and we need to have these tomorrow. And they need to be cheap, and they need to be everywhere, so we have this sort of biosensor in the planet telling us what's happening before it's too late.
Just to jump on that, having automated networked sensors, sort of taking the research that we do and applying the Internet of Things to it is desperately what we need. We just recently, I'm a researcher as well, and we just recently put together an analysis which is in review right now, which is, in our view, is the first ever global map of where all species are on the planet, in land and in the ocean. Usually when you see something like this, you see a picture of the land and then the ocean is grayed out, or you see the picture of the ocean and land is grayed out. And what we've done, because of data availability, is we've been able to bring together something like 100,000 different species in their distribution, and then, crucially, not just say, this is where they are, but use all the available environmental data to explain why those species are where they are. Now, this is a first step. Historically, this has been a question for scientists for hundreds of years, but we've just had to make progress iteratively by focusing on certain species we know, like birds, in certain places like South America. But we don't have to limit ourselves that way anymore. We can integrate everything, like Barb's saying, but we certainly need the data streams, the satellites, and to do that, Barb mentioned environmental DNA, like having a Ziploc bag of water. We're just about to install essentially a robot, but it's a 50-gallon drum, and we're putting this in a stream on the California coast to count salmon as they go by, and using environmental DNA to do that. This is revolutionary technology that we desperately need to put on mobile autonomous platforms and survey to the places that aren't so near to the coast. Now, we could send divers to snorkel these streams and count fish. Wouldn't it be a lot easier just to put a sensor in there and do that? And that's where we are right now, the technology that we can have, and we're just starting to scratch the surface with this.
Yeah, in a sense, space technology is easy. There's a vacuum up there and some micrometeorites. The ocean is this unbreathable, corrosive liquid medium with upwellings and surges and storms, inaccessible, biologicals, and all these challenges. We're reaching the technology now and the media to actually make the vast, everlasting sea accessible to us. But we're reaching it right at that critical moment where we're facing an existential threat. And in the last century, we faced two, or the rise of fascism and the nuclear balance of terror, and we got past them. Right now, because of what Barbara said, because we don't respond to long-term threats, we're seeing it's all foreshortened, and we're seeing the threats in real time now. And so we need big dramatic responses. We need to respond to the threat of climate change and marine pollution and loss of habitat. At the level, I live in Richmond Marina. My sailboat marina is where they had Kaiser Shipyard No. 2, where they built 734 Liberty ships in 4 years. So that kind of industrial mobilization, the Manhattan Project, is what we need right now, and what this new wave of young women coming into Congress are proposing with the Green New Deal. So we have to take all the science, all the technology, and quite frankly, if you look at our economy, we've got three major sectors, sort of. The financial sector that crashed the world economy in 2008. We've got the oil and gas industry, the fossil fuel industry that's literally crashing the world. And then the tech industry based in California, which for all the problems you've got, is producing goods and services and the technological capability to understand the threats. And now we need to mobilize large parts of our population to respond to those threats. We did it twice in the last century. We'll do something in this one.
Birgitte, any additional thoughts from you?
Yes, some years ago I wrote a report on responsibility in the media, and I actually got to interview Andy Refkin of the New York Times. He's a top science reporter, and I asked him, because I was at the time working on climate change, and I asked him, why is it that we find it so hard to understand and kind of embody in ourselves an understanding of climate change? And he said, it's very simple. We don't teach our young people how to think critically. We do not teach at the elementary school level or up until you get to university, we don't teach basic scientific understanding and thinking. He said, if I had my magic wand, I would do, can I have two magic wands? I would do two things. I would first introduce, a study of maybe scuba diving is a required curriculum in, coastal states, something like that. We need to bring it down to that level. And second, popular culture. Popular culture, like, can we have a Blue Panther movie? Can we have coral SpongeBob or coral, whatever his name is? So I think we need to tell more stories.
Carl Coral.
There you go. Carl Coral. Yeah. Hollywood, you listening? So, I think we need to tell more stories. And I don't mean kind of didactic, beat them over the head about, maybe there's a movie about coral bleaching or something like that. Not that, but somehow find stories that take the mythology and the fascination with the ocean. Because God knows, you go down deep enough and it's all science fiction down there. So that's
You're raising a great issue, and it's one just Friday we were discussing at Stanford. So there really is an ocean literacy problem. I'm working on a project right now trying to think about at the collegiate level how to bring about ocean literacy. We also are working with Aspen High Seas, trying to figure out if we could do an ocean conservation corps. So what if there was a way to get youth engaged at a very early age that was global? So I think that we've done a lot of that in our land ethic, but we've done a little less because of its inaccessibility, the high seas, places like that, for oceans. But it really begins at the basic problem of teaching how oceans work. So if you went down the street in a beautiful place like Monterey and I asked 4 individuals, well, what's the basic concept of how oceans and atmosphere or oceans and climate or even just oceans, what do you think about how they work? And I don't think we'd get very clear answers because we leave it out of our basic education. We leave biosphere out of our education. So what we're thinking about at our university is how do we get it back in? And how do we make it so accessible that a business student, an English major, or anybody who wants to learn about the planet? We do it right now through a course called Stanford at Sea. It's related to Sea Education Association of Woods Hole. These are opportunities for high school, college students to actually have an immersion experience, but we need more people to engage in that immersion.
And along those lines, at the festival, when you mentioned that, Barbara, you just made me think. Ocean literacy is kind of a new concept, and it's not introduced in middle school or high school level. And it's such an important part of our education, and I think it's becoming more and more critical to reach kids at that particular age. And and like you said, it needs to be on a global level. At the festival, we do a free program for middle school and high school students to come and see the films for free. And so many of the teachers are so excited about it because they just don't have the time or the bandwidth to include something like ocean literacy in their program. So they use the films as an opportunity to get the kids excited about that. We also have a student film competition. Kids all over the world send in a film, 5 minutes or less, that tell us about the ocean. We use the Monterey Bay Aquarium, has great curriculum online for ocean literacy, but I don't think we can stress enough how much we need to start engaging really young kids at the middle school and high school level to start thinking about this and make it a part of our core curriculum.
And one of our projects, Blue Frontier projects in this year, 2019, is the Blue Beat program, which is just basic idea that the only resource not fully exploited in the ocean is good storytelling.
Yeah.
And to do media trainings for scientists like we've done at IUCN, and for also just grassroots activists, to understand, how to talk to journalists, how to tell stories, how to use the tools at hand, our phones and otherwise, to produce, not to do campaigns, to tell stories, because that's what connects with people. And it, it's instinctual with our young activists. They're all using those tools, but it's a challenge. I mean, I want to translate 50 Ways to Save the Ocean to Spanish is one of, the immediate needs. So it's not Carl, it's Carlos the coral.
Oh, Carlos.
I think the storytelling is absolutely critical. I mean, I'm a researcher at heart, but I try to tell stories, and anything from the Book of Jonah to Moby Dick is the ocean has captivated our imagination for millennia, and obviously it's our goal at the aquarium to inspire people about the ocean. We get about 2 million visitors a year, and most of them, geographically or because of their own physical limitations, cannot actually go into the ocean. They're from Kansas or they have physical limitations. And and so one of the amazing things for us is to see the transformation that people have when they go in the door to when they leave. And yesterday, 2 days ago, Saturday morning, I was speaking to 100 elementary and middle school science teachers in the state of California, and everything that we've been saying right here, we just need to inculcate these ideas into curriculum in public schools, so that it is not like an exception, but it is the norm, that people have a first-hand experience of the ocean and what it is, as well as strong curriculum in math and science. It absolutely has to happen.
And I apologize, I think, insulting your sea otters earlier, but we're sort of unique in California. We've got these two apex marine predators, white sharks and sea otters, that are vital for the environment, and it's one of the only places where one apex predator will occasionally eat the other. But bite the
It
other.
probably happens more than you think in the ocean.
Alrighty, I have one more hopeful question, and then we'll open up the room for our Q&A as well as the door. So let's maybe end up on a hopeful note. Are there around the world societies that you believe are really getting it, and where actually society, a combination of government, local groups, are actually taking action?
California, Portugal, Palau.
I think we hit on something earlier when we said, we are in a very ideal place. California is not normal with respect to the United States. I think that we are leading the charge in a lot of ways with environmental legislation and preservation, especially with the ocean. Our Marine Life Protection Act, the Monterey Bay, Farallones, National Marine Sanctuaries, these don't exist in a lot of places around the country. So we're very fortunate. I think we need to replicate the California model in other places.
All right, questions from the audience.
Given the volume of plastic currently produced in the world, which is about 300 million tons per year, since the 1950s, it just went exponentially. I heard that it's probably going to double by 2050. So has anyone kind of modeled out what an ocean is going to look like in 2050?
Well, I'll jump on that one because we've been looking at this question. So if you remember, one of the first scientific sort of pieces of information which led to our understanding of climate change was Charles Keeling's CO2 curve from the top of Mauna Loa in Hawaii. And that showed the oscillating annual atmospheric concentration of CO2. And it wasn't just seasonally moving around, it was trending upwards. That started in about 1958. And I think that was a very important piece of science that led us to say, wait a second, this is a problem, right? We don't have that right now for plastic. We don't have a Keeling curve. We're working on understanding that. But one of the things that we toss around is, with respect to climate change, if we could magically turn off the spigot of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas equivalents, we'd probably be dealing with climate change for about 1,000 years just because of how convoluted the Earth's climate system is. If we could magically turn off the spigot for plastic, how much longer would we have plastic in the ocean? I think it's far less, probably around 50 years. So I'm much more hopeful about the change that we can make with plastic. Yes, you are correct that we are, and by the way, the plastic and the climate problem are not unrelated because plastic is made out of petrochemicals. So it is an oil-based, for the most part, there's recycled and there's agriculture-based products. But probably around 50 years if we could cut it off today. But there's more and more going into the ocean. So it's clearly a very significant problem. But we don't yet know how big a problem that is. We need that Keeling curve.
But they're all linked to rock oil. They're all linked to petroleum.
Correct.
The offshore drilling, the plastics, the protection of our shores at risk. We just need to move on. I mean, coal and oil were great energy systems for the 16th and 19th century. Now it's, as I said, it's product liability. Used as directed, it spoils everything. So let's move on and do what we did after, when rock oil replaced whale oil, the economy expanded. With the Green New Deal, it's going to expand again. We'll have jobs and clean future if we choose to.
And there's an upstream and a downstream problem, right, too. So it's how much plastic are we producing? From what I understand, some of the big plastic producers, all the single-use cups and tubs and all that stuff, apparently they want to produce more, which is a big problem. And on the other side is, let's clean up what we've got. So you guys probably heard of Boyan Slat and System 001, and he's trying right now to clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, right? So there's controversy, meaning, well, why are you focusing on that when you should be focusing on upstream and the manufacture? I think we really need to do both, because it's like, you've messed up your room. Well, you got to clean up your room and then see if you can find, more sustainable toys to fill it with.
One question from the Dory. When it comes to sensing ocean data, can you talk a little about the difference in data needed in comparison to what we can measure with Earth observation satellites? What is the role of EO satellites in building our understanding of the ocean?
So the Earth satellite system has done a fantastic job about telling us about the skin of the ocean, the surface, but the volume of the ocean is much larger. And so we know a lot about the top portion of the ocean, but we don't know a lot about the depths. And part of the mystery of Earth circulation is that without knowing the conditions beneath the sea, and by not having a complete sensor system on the planet, we have surprises that are going to happen. So I believe that it'll be in this next 50 years that we do a very remarkable job of instrumenting the oceans, which has been behind the rest of the planet, and we're going to do it with cheap, small sensors that we have to figure out how to seed the ocean currents without creating, if you will, pollution. We're going to do it with a series of buoys and gliders and all sorts of new instrumentation we could only imagine, and we're going to need big data companies who are committed to making it public data, being behind these efforts and then contributing to this incredible analysis that has to happen that will increase our understanding of our planet.
I'll just build on, because the original question was about Earth observation data, and so that's kind of traditional satellites in that way. And so I think in the last 5 years, we're doing things that were impossible 7 years ago in that way. And so a lot of what we were doing with satellites at sea, ship positions, such as with Fishing Watch, emissions that are coming off of sulfur plumes, we're doing air quality measurements from those large cargo vessels. That's all available now. And now the next thing is a lot of the public radar systems that are available. We're measuring all the dark fleets that aren't broadcasting and things like that. So that continues to evolve. But I was curious, Barbara, you had said what you really wanted was a big data system for the ocean. Are there big data systems for the land that you think are great models, or other ones that we could really look to say, well, how do we tweak that for the ocean?
Good question, tough one, Brian.
Okay. And you mentioned something else right after that I wasn't familiar with the name of it.
But I think you want to keep in mind that when we say fish and chips or fish and chips, what we really want to do is bring these big data sets together. So what we need to do it is in a public forum where it's not being monopolized by a company to be sold back to us. There's a little bit of that going on in the world right now. So what we need, I want to just emphasize that one of the more important papers in ocean science came out last week in Science by a Duke team. It was about really basic aspects of how the Atlantic circulates and creates, what we call the bottom water that's critical for pushing the system. And it isn't working like we think it's working, and they found that out by seeding the ocean with buoys that were able to go very deep and then come back to the surface and transmit their data. So what do we really need to solve on planet Earth? Communications across the globe. All right, one of the challenges we have at sending ocean data, working sensors in the ocean, is we don't have the ability right now in the 21st century to communicate from everywhere on the planet. Solving that communication problem is the key to solving, in part, getting some of these sensors in place that will tell us about the planet. So we need to take some of the economy that we're spending across this planet and put it towards increasing our knowledge of Earth. And as soon as we do that, we'll be stepping towards our future in a positive direction.
Yeah, like Thursday, I'll be in D.C. Covering the AAAS, that's American Association for the Advancement of Science, biggest science gathering on Earth. And if you question whether scientists are nerds, they have it every year on Valentine's Day.
That's right, they do.
But it's interesting to see this contrast and this great excitement with the hard scientists and the natural scientists are like ready to slit their wrists. And I think that taking those hard sciences hard sciences that involve data gathering and big data and all, and putting the natural scientist in charge of, or having the access to use them.
That's right.
To identify these challenges.
As long as they're not eating sushi while they're doing it.
What's one thing you think Google's doing wrong that's harming the oceans? What can we do different? We like feedback.
Well, I will say that Google Earth has been transformative, and I'd like more of that. I think they started off with just basic imagery, and then they started with time series of imagery, and then you could download it, and then with added features. I think that has been transformative for people that, especially the user interface. And I think providing more platforms for large data sharing, like Barbara's been talking about, is absolutely critical. Global Fishing Watch. There is one of my favorite websites is called Null School, which is just a visualization of environmental data like wind and real-time temperature. It's amazing if you guys have seen it. We just need more tools like this and make them accessible for non-technical data people that can use them in intuitive formats.
Yeah, shout out to our Google Oceans friends. They are a small unit here that basically have done more for the oceans in the last decade than people realize. So we really need more of that type of quality effort that then is inviting the community from the globe to sit down with them and create the type of databases and data sets that are distributed publicly that we need to improve our planet.
And I'd just second or third that to say, we gave one of our Peter Benchley Ocean Awards to Google Ocean early on, and we're seeing an evolution, and I'm just hoping, if Silicon Valley could get as excited about using its capabilities to save the living, salty heart of the planet as they are about self-driving cars, then I'd be really, so more of the same is what we'd say, and on a larger scale it up to the challenge.
So maybe more of that and less Google buses, maybe, on the roads.
All righty, before we close, Bridget, anything from you?
I say more Google Doodles about the ocean.
We've been planning for this voyage for over 3 years. I've been thinking about it for over a decade. And what we're going to do is depart from Honolulu for the White Shark Cafe. This is a place that the only way we know about it is white sharks took us there. And in this region, there's a gathering place. And why these animals gather here, we don't know.
I mean, all of us on here are incredibly excited. And this White Shark Cafe is one of those last real expeditions. We know very little about it. We have no idea about why this massive predator is leaving California and coming here.
There must be something so important here. Part of this is about discovering what's in the ocean, and the white sharks are leading us there.
Why do the sharks come out to this remote part of the ocean? One of the ways we approach answering that question is to characterize the habitat. And we've put together a variety of tools and approaches to let us do that. What are the conditions in the water column itself? Temperature, oxygen, salinity. We're going to be sending sound waves into the water column to see what reflections of that sound tell us about the concentrations of animals versus depth. We're using eDNA to tell us how different species of animals occupy this space.
We got some white shark kids? What's breaking news here? Oh my god! The first try! Wow!
We've been using the sail drones as scouts. The sail drones have been out here surveying the region in advance of our arrival, and they will continue to survey it while we're here. And they can alert us to things that may be just over the horizon.
It communicates to us a lot of the sensor data. We get summaries to give us an idea, for example, where we should be sampling on this vessel based on what the sail drones have seen.
For me, there's no substitute for direct observation. I want to see what's there. And if I can't go down myself, then the best thing is to use is an underwater vehicle, a remotely operated vehicle.
182. It's right here, guys. It's in visual range right here.
182. Yeah, Bridget, I might have eyes on it here. About 100 meters straight.
And we're now recovering each of these instruments as it comes up. When we get the tag back, it has second-by-second behavioral data and environmental data on what the white sharks do.
Nice one, Mick. It's a female. It's been on for 5 months. 3-second interval data. Wow, we got a bite on it too. Look at this. Look at these deep chips. Whoa. Look at that. A lot of rapid oscillatory diving here. This is spanning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of intensive diving that just continues.
Wow.
Look at this.
That's
Oh
incredible.
my God, look at this.
This guy is active.
So this is right up until the tag popped up. It's got the most intense diving bout here. That's really cool. We're in a spot where rapid oscillatory diving is like really intense right now.
Yeah.
Look at this, day and night. It's gold, you guys. It's just gold in the form of data.
Although Otis is mainly focusing on the oceanography and measuring what's going on underneath the surface of the ocean, Otis can also listen for tags that are in different species, so we can kind of use Otis as a sentinel underneath the ocean, kind of spying on who's down there for us while we're up on the ship doing all the other amazing science.
The high seas covers almost half this planet. And in the high seas, there are very few rules. It's almost a Wild West. And so if we're going to save white sharks and other iconic animals such as tunas and other sharks for the next generation, we have to start thinking about where the boundaries should be, where the protection should be. This cruise is actually a beginning in which we're going to go out, offer the opportunity for policy changes that protect a region that no one would think about needs protection for white sharks. Through new knowledge, we can reduce ignorance and then translate that into action.
Alrighty. And I think with that, we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank you very much for your participation and for practically being here. The audience for spending an hour with us. And I think to be continued, there's a lot of work to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.